Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN's Director of Advisor Success, Malcolm Thomas, on the show today. Malcolm joined us about 6 months ago and brought with him a wealth of knowledge and experience to help our Advisor Success Department fulfill their mission of helping XYPN advisors become better financial planners and better business owners. Malcolm started his career with MassMutual and realized he was better suited for a supervisory role than sales. He eventually moved on to John Hancock, also in a supervisory role, before shifting over to Signator, John Hancock's broker-dealer, as their director of recruiting. He has seen almost every corner of the industry and saw that the future of the business is in fee-for-service, fiduciary-based financial planning. And seeing XYPN's growth and potential impact brought him out here to headquarters in Bozeman, Montana. This interview is filled with education around the various business models out there, what struggle each are facing, and his outlook on the future of the industry. We closed out with a bit of a preview of what his department is working on for our advisors, which I cannot wait to see launched. XYPN Radio listeners, you're invited to attend the event of the year, and even better, you're invited to get your pass at the best possible price. The can't-miss annual XYPN Live Conference returns to St. Louis in September 2019 with valuable content for new firm launchers and established firm owners alike. Take a couple of days to work on your business instead of in your business, and connect with like-minded financial advisors leading the real financial planning movement. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/XYPN Live Radio to get a deal on your pass through the end of the month. But hurry, the price goes up at the first of the year. Visit xyplanningnetwork.com/XYPN Live Radio to grab your pass today. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/184. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Malcolm. Hey, Malcolm, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, Alan. Appreciate being here.
So for the second time in 3 or 4 weeks, I guess, I have actually been sitting next to my guest. So this is only the third time in the history of XYPN Radio where we have 180-ish episodes now that I've actually been able to look at the person that I was interviewing, which is kind of cool. So we are thrilled to have Malcolm Thomas on, who is our Director of Advisor Success here at XYPN. So to sort of kick things off, let's go back in time, talk a little bit about career history and sort of what led you to XYPN. Did you start your career in financial services?
Yeah, so we'll go all the way back to the beginning here. I graduated Gettysburg College in 2003. And at that point, as I was a business major, I was looking at different opportunities. And I wanted to get into finance. It was something that I always had an interest in. I wanted to get into more of financial advice and financial planning. At least that's what I thought. But I didn't really know what that meant.
I say, and at 2003, I don't feel like it was still this like developing career. Like financial planning didn't really mean much at that time.
No. And my interest in probably financial planning was a background growing up in the fact that I was very involved in our family's finances and understanding that and working through. And my parents were very open with us growing up as kids with our finances and what our situation was and planning for school, understanding when to take student loans and how to file those. That was something that I did my senior year in high school and talked through with my family all the way through college, understanding, what I owed in student loan debt when I graduated and how I was going to pay that off. So that was always something that was interesting to me.
So talk to me about what does it mean to be involved in the family's finances? Because as financial planners, we all know that talking about money is a very taboo topic. We certainly don't talk to our kids about how much money we make, at least generally speaking. So how did your parents involve you in the family finances?
So it was very clear on what we had available to us to spend. And if we wanted or needed more than that involved us getting a job and working for that. And then specifically when it came to colleges and understanding how much college cost and, how we were going to pay for it. because there wasn't a 529 plan or savings there. And so if we wanted to go to a school like Gettysburg, we were going to have to take loans to do it. And what that looked like from a payoff perspective, and ultimately, was that more valuable than going to a state school? And so having those conversations and seeing the actual numbers, when you look at it's $30,000 a year.
I say, what was the difference in Gettysburg and State College?
To go to that, and it ends up being with student loans and after applying for grants, about $15,000 to $20,000 a year difference. And understanding that that would all be my responsibility to pay back.
So 18 years old, 17, 18, making this decision, how do you decide that Gettysburg is worth $60,000 of student loans?
Looking back, I may not have made the correct decision, but at that point, I was confident that that was an investment in my future. Ultimately, I wanted to go to a school that, after looking at all the schools, it fit everything that I was looking for. A small liberal arts school that had good athletics that I could participate in, and part of the country that I was interested in being very interested in history and in knowing the history of our country and wanting to be in that area.
I feel like that's why everyone knows Gettysburg is not for the best reasons, not the best battle. But yeah, I love the book, The Opposite of Spoiled from Ron Lieber, because it talks a lot about how to engage kids in the finances and really, I mean, very, very early on to really have open and honest conversations. And I feel like, I bet if we polled financial planners, we struggle just as much to talk to our kids about money as probably the average American. And so it's cool to hear a story about, just what it means to really expose the numbers and what is actually there, instead of being like, oh, sure, we'll figure it out. And figure it out means coming out of college with $60,000 student loan debt that you didn't know how to pay off. So really cool to hear. You had an interest in personal finance. So you said sports in Gettysburg. So what sports did you play?
So I played soccer all the way through at Gettysburg. It was a Division III school, the perfect, I think, level of commitment for me at that point. So I really enjoyed it. It was great during the season and gave me the flexibility outside of that to, really enjoy college and, get the most out of it.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say that I actually had a scholarship to run track in college and ended up picking University of Georgia because I did not want to run track at a D2 school because I did not want to work that hard physically. I wanted to be able to enjoy my college experience. Again, it worked out, but who knows where life would take you. It's funny, those decisions that you make, especially when you're young, and how they don't always seem like a big deal, but you're just like making a decision based on, whether or not you can have a couple extra beers during your college experience. So anyway, enough of that. So you said you were interested in finance, got your degree, I assume, in finance. So sort of what was the launch of your career then? So
from there, it was interesting attending a lot of different career fairs and meeting with different companies and talking to them. And, I didn't really know what I was looking for at that point, and ended up meeting with a firm that was essentially a stockbroker, ended up meeting with a couple wirehouse firms, as well as a few firms in New York. And ultimately, though, talked to MassMutual Financial Group and ended up choosing general agency just outside of Washington, D.C. with MassMutual. And I think it's fair to say that I really didn't know what I was getting myself into when I took that job. When you sit down and you talk to the sales manager and the people in charge of the firm, and you talk about helping people with their finances and financial planning and all the different things that they do to help the clients that they work with. And then when you arrive and you get put through a insurance training session on how to sell whole life insurance and disability insurance and long-term care insurance and the best ways to do that, you start to clarify, I guess, what different parts of the industry look like at that point.
Yeah. So we had Dave on last week, actually, and he was at a MassMutual firm who he said was like super financial planning centric and probably would have stayed there had they let him give more tax advice. They're pretty restrictive, even though he had a CPA background. So how is MassMutual structured that his branch office that he was working at allowed a lot of financial planning and what he would consider to be comprehensive financial planning, and yours didn't? Like what is their structure that creates those abnormalities? Because I feel like some companies like Edward Jones, like what happens in every office is the same no matter what. It's a little more franchised.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's really franchised that way. I think that each office does set a lot of their own priorities and, are running kind of, their own businesses and they look at what's the best way to do it. I started with a group. There were probably 20 of us that came in the class. Essentially there were, after 6 months, there may have been 3 to 5 of us that were left.
Wow, 20 to 3 in 6 months?
And, and I don't think that was really a shock to the people that were there. That was kind of what they expected. They used that time up front to provide training, but also, you get kind of dropped into the deep end and it's a sink or swim mentality at that point. And while it was difficult, I wouldn't want necessarily other people to go through that. It was a great learning experience. And I can honestly say that it shaped the way I look at things, moving forward for the rest of my career. And there's things that I learned in that 6 months and in that first year that I, again, wouldn't trade for the world.
So what determined the 3 to 5 that stayed versus not? Was it purely production or was there more to it than that?
I think that it was one production, but it was also kind of, could you find that niche in what specific things that you could do, that would make you successful? And, everyone that was able to make it, was able to find a specific thing, whether it was, working in the investment area and supporting another planner who was doing that, or it was someone, in my case, I really focused on small businesses and supplemental disability insurance to employees as a way to get in the door with companies. And so doing things like that, where if you find a specific thing that you can focus on and you can talk and you can demonstrate value, then, that starts to create the little bit of income that you need to start to progress.
I don't know if this is the best metaphor, but it sort of sounds like it's like they basically dropped you off at a construction site and they were like, I don't know, go find something that's helpful. And it's like, hopefully you fall in with the electrician and like learn their trade. But otherwise you're just like wandering around the job site looking for something to do. And eventually people are going to say like, oh, you're not doing enough and you got to go. And
I think one of the positives of our firm, the Mass Mutual agency that I joined, was it was one of the larger firms in the country. And the people in charge of it, they did a great job of, identifying maybe people that weren't right for the sales roles. And this is what ultimately happened in my role is I decided and the firm decided that sales maybe wasn't the right path for me. I was doing okay and making enough of an income, but long-term, was that what I wanted to do? And in conversations with the firm management and the general agent that ran the firm at that time, he saw me more in a supervisory operational role, helping run the day-to-day of the firm. And so from there, I went from, the sales track more into the operational and supervisory track, and took my Series 24 and started to get more involved in the supervisory components and running really the day-to-day operations in the agency.
It's really interesting. One mistake I know a lot of companies make is they take their best salespeople and try to turn them into managers. Really, your best salespeople should just be out selling, and then your best manager should be managers. So it actually sounds like that was the path that they took for you. How do they compensate a manager? Because salespeople, like, it's just production, right? Like you sell $1 million worth of whatever, and you make $700,000. Were you salaried at that point?
Yeah. So there were a couple different ways that, managers in that structure are compensated. The salespeople, it is commission. And then from there's an override on a salesperson's commission that a sales manager who helps manage those salespeople receives. And then in a supervisory role, it's a salaried role with then bonuses based on overall firm revenue and production.
What would be a typical salary override, or is it pretty varied?
Yeah, it would vary based on the experience level of the sales individual. And so, but essentially when you think about in the insurance world, right, there is a base commission, a product, which is, in a life insurance, we'll say it's 50% of the premium, right? That's the base commission that's paid to the salesperson. Then additionally, there's the additional 50 to 60% that is available in an override that would then get split between a sales manager, a general agent, and the firm. And so that's essentially, kind of that additional override is used to compensate the managers in that role.
Okay, got it. So MassMutual is an insurance company turned doing financial services. You also mentioned wirehouse, and just because I know part of your story, coming from broker-dealer world. So can you define for listeners, because I can't do the best job of explaining this, but like, what is the difference? And why do we talk about like, oh, I talked to some wirehouses. I worked at a BD hybrid. I worked insurance company that had an RIA. Like, what are the differences in your mind between sort of the different options and career paths? Because the reality is most, especially younger advisors, are going to either end up in or at least get pitched on working in one of these formats. Like, what are the differences?
I think a lot of the differences come down to how the compensation is structured. Right. And what is profitable for the firm versus profitable, for the individual. I look at, what an advisor in a wirehouse, a broker dealer, or an RIA, a lot of times they could be doing all the same things, right? They could be offering the same services. It's really about, though, how those services are structured. And I would say the other important piece of it is ownership, right? Of the clients, of the business, and, essentially of your business, right? When you look at in the wirehouse and the broker dealer world, in most cases, the agreements are with the corporate entity versus the individual or the RIA itself.
Meaning that the company owns your book of clients, not you.
Yes. And despite as there's been movement towards in broker dealers to have the, ownership of, we talk a lot in the broker dealer world of an advisor owning their business, but in actuality, the clients are clients of the broker dealer.
They own the business. They just don't own the revenue of the business.
Correct.
Is essentially it, which means you don't own a business.
Yeah. And what they, really they own, you own the right to your client information if you leave. You don't own the revenue unless you move those clients with you if you decide that broker dealer is not correct for you.
So I like the way you framed that, because I do think stuff's getting really muddled. It used to be a lot cleaner around what was a broker dealer, what was a wirehouse, what was an RIA. And now you have insurance agencies with RIAs and a broker dealer affiliation. And it's like, whoa, what are you again? And I like the way you framed that it is a lot around overall just like compensation for the structure and just the service model that you can be doing, quote unquote, financial planning. And just the way that you're going to be compensated is going to be different because if you don't have an RA, then you can't be paid for financial advice and that sort of thing. But it is getting really complicated when you have folks that are able to wear 2 or even 3 hats, where they can go from being, I'm your fiduciary because I'm with the RIA, and then all of a sudden I'm selling you a product, and it can be, in the same paragraph, in the same conversation, that someone can switch between the two.
Yeah, I think that, and I know a lot of really great financial planners and financial advisors who are at an insurance broker dealer like a MassMutual, or at an independent broker dealer and running a firm, or have their own RIA. And so that's I think that's probably from a consumer perspective, some of the confusion, right? Is that those are 3 very different models, but you can be providing the same services in each of those models.
Yeah, we don't have to rabbit trail too much down this route, but I actually just got a Facebook message today from someone who asked the question of, can someone at a broker dealer be a fiduciary? And my answer was, well, they can act in their client's best interest, but they can't be held to the legal standard of a fiduciary, because my definition of fiduciary is you're only one if you can be sued for not being one. And while, you can say, well, yes, I get paid on commission, or yes, I have this broker dealer affiliation, but I'm going to do what's in the best interest of my clients. That's fine. And it sounds good, but you don't have to. You can stop at any time, whereas an RIA cannot. And so, if you want to find out if you're a fiduciary, take a fiduciary oath. We have copies on our website. Take it to your compliance officer and ask if you can sign it. If they light it on fire, you will know that you are not allowed to sign it. Anyway, okay, so Mass Mutual, you got put into a supervisory role. Sort of what was the evolution from there?
Yeah, so it was a great learning experience. I think that, being in an agency and seeing advisors work on a daily basis, I learned, and saw every part of the industry. And I think that was a really, one of the things I think that surprises people is I say, don't be afraid, get involved with compliance, because in the compliance role and the supervisory role, you see every part of this business. And it's a great way to learn the business and to learn, the right way to do business. From there, I decided to, after working there for a little over 4 years, decided that I was going to relocate to New England, Boston area, where my family's essentially from the greater Boston area, and took a job with John Hancock, and specifically with their broker-dealer Signator Investors. And initially, again, in a supervisory role, working with firms and advisors that were affiliated with their broker-dealer and helping them understand the compliance and supervisory rules that were being implemented, helping them, if they were to get audited, helping them through those audits and how to respond and how to handle that. But really, it was about how to implement and put supervisory procedures in place to protect their firms and protect their businesses.
Okay. How does one get that job? Those are the types of jobs I'm just like, where do you even find a job like that?
It's something that, I think the reason that I was the right fit for that role at that time is the background that I had in working in a financial advisory firm and understanding the sales side, but also the supervisory and compliance side, and being able to translate between those two. So when I would sit down with a financial advisor, talking to them about not necessarily, okay, here's the rule, but here's why we need to do these things. And here's how the best way to implement it in your practice so it's beneficial for your clients and your business, rather than going in and saying, here's the rule, you have to do this, no questions asked, just do it, right? And I think the ability to communicate and explain why these things are important and that they really are there for the best interest of the clients and their business is important. And because I was able to, translate that for the advisors and help them do that, that's ultimately what moved me from that role more into a practice management and business consulting role with the broker dealer. And, not just focusing on supervisory procedures, but focusing on technology and, marketing and business development concepts of how to, not just protect their business, but all right, let's also focus on how to grow your business. And that was kind of the ultimate progression for me in the broker dealer.
So, some people would say well, you can't teach it if you haven't done it, right? Like in order to teach marketing or teach technology, you have to have done it. And so therefore, we'll have some people will hire quote unquote marketing coaches that are really advisors that have been successful in marketing or trying to train others how to do it. What is your take on consultants and coaches and that sort of thing that, no best practices, haven't necessarily done it in the firm? How do you, I guess, help advisors when you haven't had to do it yourself?
So I think the biggest piece that I like to focus on and how I've always approached this is, the best ideas I get are from advisors. And so, when I'm looking at talking to someone about implementing a process in their business to help them become more efficient, that's not something that, that I've developed just based on my experience. What I've done is talk to 3 or 4 successful advisors that are running successful, very efficient businesses, reviewed their process, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then take the best of those pieces and help another advisor implement it in their business in a way that's right for them. Not every process is the same and not every business is the same. And that's why I think it's important for someone in my role, whether it was at the broker dealer or even today here at XYPN, is to be able to listen, understand the business, understand the different processes, and be able to take best practices from everyone and then share those best practices with advisors. I have the most respect for financial advisors and planners because when I sat in that role, I understand how difficult that was.
Yeah.
And I think that, one of the things for someone who may have not sat in that seat and, worked with clients, they see an advisor doing what they're doing and they make it look really easy, right? The great advisors make it look really easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people mistake that anyone could do that, right? And I know that's not true. And I think that, that's why I have so much respect and I want to help advisors become better planners, but really run better businesses. And I think that's really, something that we can do by getting best practices and sharing them with the advisors.
Yeah, it is the advantage that we have with 830, 840, whatever we're at today, advisory firms that are part of XY is that we are able to pull best practices from the different advisors and different practices from different advisors. So it's not like there's one perfect firm we're trying to emulate. It's really this sort of collective wisdom. And that we're able to pull that information and share that information and improve upon it and all of those things as we're going through. But anyway, so you're at John Hancock, which they had, you said the broker-dealer relationship with Signator, you were, you sort of started transitioning into, it sounds like more with the broker-dealer. So did you make the move to Signator?
Yeah. So officially, 4 years in was full-time at Signator Investors. And, still Signator was owned by John Hancock. But I was part of the team there, the leadership team that helped, really transition from a career agency model system inside of John Hancock Financial Network, transforming Signator into an independent broker-dealer. And while it was still owned by John Hancock as a parent company, what we did is essentially, transition all the advisors to independent contractors where they, again, going back to that ownership of the business component, updating the privacy policy. So the client records and, client essentially retention was with the advisor versus, just being owned by the broker dealer. And so in doing that, we were making these changes in the broker dealer, not necessarily because it was, something that John Hancock wanted. It was what the clients and what the advisors were moving towards, right? They were looking to, be able to have, not be bound to just sell proprietary products, right? That's what the good advisors were pushing for, is be able to have open product architecture, sell what's right for the client, act in the client's best interest. And in order to retain and attract top level talent at a broker dealer, you had to shift your business model. And that's really, the option that we selected at Signator was to shift that business model from offering proprietary products and to open product architecture, not compensating differently on John Hancock products versus other products, and really, put more ownership into the advisor's business.
I've heard of broker dealers making that transition. Not very many. I've never heard of them doing it with all of the existing reps. Like, it almost sounds like the worst business decision you could have made for your existing business is being like, hey, we're just going to give ownership of all of your clients back to you as a gift. But I guess it makes sense in the broader context of, if you want to be able to attract and retain advisors, ultimately you're going to have to do those things.
Yeah, and I think that was the ultimate, long-term game plan, understanding where the industry was going. And that in order to survive in the broker-dealer space long-term, we needed to do that. It also helped set the stage. Really, there was, I would say, two major events in the past, 4 years working at Signator that kind of, really led me to XYPN. And, that was going through two different acquisitions, one on the buy side, and then ultimately the second was on the sell side of, being part of the process of selling Signator to Royal Alliance and Advisor Group. But both of those, really exposed me to different parts of the business, understanding that, the broker-dealer business at this point is really all about scale. As margins, you don't have the larger margins that you have on the insurance products, the proprietary products that you had in the past. And so as the advisor's business continues to transition to manage money, fee-based accounts, planning, those margins are smaller on the broker-dealer side. So in order to make up for that smaller margin, you need to have scale. And that's really what you're seeing across the board now in all the broker-dealer space is acquisition after acquisition and, continuing to, needing scale in order to be a profitable business unit.
So the way you're describing it sounds like advisors are moving towards this, we'll say, more fiduciary, more client-centric model, and the broker-dealers are basically just trying to play catch-up with just being sure they can retain those advisors, because if advisors weren't pounding on the table saying, hey, look, we want to be able to transact non-proprietary products, we want to put the best product in front of the client instead of just, the one that's approved, probably the broker-dealers would have moved this way, which really sounds like a grassroots movement towards fee-for-service, towards financial planning.
And so you see that, right, when you're working at the broker-dealer. And that's ultimately, I think, what, again, led me to XYPN is you see that movement's happening. And the question becomes, can we do enough at the broker-dealer in order to make that transition here? Or is it better to start, almost from scratch the way XYPN did and build it that way? And, I think the determining factor for me was realizing that the only way we were going to be able to grow in the broker-dealer side was through acquisition. And if you're doing that, there's a problem, right? You're not attracting new, young, talented people into your organization and growing that way. And if you're only growing by going out and acquiring and paying for existing business and advisors that are really the same as you currently have today, the long-term growth probably isn't going to be there. And so that's really kind of, as I started to look around and realize, and I think if you look at the trends, the Cerulli studies and all the different things of the number of advisors, the average age of advisors, who's joining, that's kind of a sobering numbers right there, right, for our industry. And looking and trying to find a different way to start businesses and bring young and talented people in is important. And I think that's ultimately what led me to XYPN.
Yeah, getting enough young people into the industry, like that is our number one problem, getting them to come in. And to your point, there's a limited number of people coming into this profession. There's a lot of reasons for that, perception being one of them. Just because people think, the whole we'll hire 20 and 3 will make it in 6 months is how we all are, which is unfortunate, but it's a reputation we earned because we haven't squashed it yet. There's a limited number of people that you're competing for. And it sounds to me like, maybe some of the broker dealers are still trying to figure out what's the value proposition, what's the sales pitch to a young person who wants to be an advisor that they have that can win someone instead of an independent RIA or one of these other models. And that's a tough sell.
It is. And also balancing, the short term versus the long term from a revenue perspective, right? Is it worth investing the money and the time and the resources that you need to invest to train someone versus, what's the short term benefit for me to go out and recruit someone from a competing broker dealer that has a book of business and has revenue already. And I may pay for those assets and revenue to come over, but, they're going to be profitable for me, where instead, are we going to invest in younger advisors training and the resources it needs to be and for what return, right? And so that's really, I think, when you start to see that, people aren't willing to invest in younger advisors to help put the right infrastructure in place to make them successful.
Quite honestly, I think a lot of our success has come from the willingness to invest in the people that no one else would. I remember several custodial practice management groups told me they have a 95% failure rate amongst advisors that they allow onto their platform that don't meet their asset minimums. So, I think TD's around 10 million, Fidelity's at 30, Schwab's getting pushed up. I think they're at 30 or 40 million now. And the reason they don't allow young planners or people that don't have the assets is because they have such a high failure rate. My question was always, well, what are you doing for those planners to help them be successful? And the answer was, well, nothing. They're not profitable yet. So it's this self-perpetuating loop of you don't invest in them, so they're not successful, which just further says oh, well, I guess we shouldn't be investing in them. But it is expensive. really, that's why, that's what put Ameriprise on the map, and why Minneapolis is like the hub of financial services in the US, is because they had this amazing training program that they're willing to invest in their younger people. That's my understanding anyway, back in the day. But it is a challenge. But, I think the fact that we've been willing to work with advisors that have zero assets and zero revenue has been part of the difference, just because, quite honestly, no one else would.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the conception, has always been that, the opportunity is for younger advisors to come in and, partner with a senior advisor, ultimately be their successor, right? They can start working with the next generation of that person's clients. And that's a great theory, right?
It sounds great on paper.
And I know of one or two examples of where that really worked. Unfortunately, it's just not happening. And, I would talk to advisors every day that says, oh yeah, I want to bring someone in. But would never actually do it. And, are more content to continue and run their business and continue to, collect the fees and ongoing trails on that business versus ultimately bringing in a successor. So, that plan to ultimately replace the aging advisor population with new advisors and their successors just isn't materializing. And so we need to, I think that's, again, going back to the XYPN model, is ways to bring new people into the business, engage with that next generation of clients, and start working with them at this point. So you know what? When that next generation of clients inherits that 30 trillion wealth transfer, who are they going to work with, right? They're going to work with the advisor they're working with today.
I'll say it's one of the more frustrating questions I get probably on a weekly basis, is someone will show up and say something about like, oh, you have 830 advisors. So these are the succession plans, so like, how do we tie them in with our, group that has older advisors and need a successor? And my response is always like, our advisors don't want your advisor's client base. If I think about I'm 31 today, as a 31-year-old advisor, am I excited to go buy a book of business that's in their 60s and 70s, which is the vast majority of client books? One custodian gave me a quote recently that said 90% of their advisors have at least 50% of their client base in distribution mode. So 90% of advisors, so 9 out of 10 advisors, have at least half of their clients are spending more than they are putting in. Am I interested in buying that book of business? Probably not. Maybe partly ageism. I just prefer to talk to people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, because that's my age cohort. But also just it's not the best business to be buying clients that are that much older. So it is interesting how a lot of people perceive XY as like, oh, that's the future buyers of the financial planning firms. And I'm like, no. These are the people who are going to undercut your growth and the ability for you to sell your practice, because they're going to work with all the young clients today that eventually you would want to work with. You're just not willing to work with them today. And by the time they're quote unquote big enough to be a real client of your firms, that XY member has been working with them for 15 years, helped turn them into that ideal client, and they're not leaving that advisor.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that always gets talked about is in a lot of meetings and a lot of practice management sessions and all these things, is for advisors today to, make sure you're engaging with your clients' kids and you're, and you're involving them and you're trying to engage. And ultimately, so, when they, when your clients pass away and the money transfers to their next generation, you have a relationship with them. Well, to be perfectly honest, that's not going to happen, right?
It just doesn't work that way.
And I can tell you that, the advisor that works with my parents will not be working with me when they ultimately pass away and that money. The advisor that I'm working with today will be the advisor that I work with, and we work through, those legacy planning issues for my parents. And so that's where I think the difference is rather than advisors trying to engage, through their clients to the next generation, skip that whole and just engage directly with the next generation and help them solve their problems. And at that point, when ultimately those things happen, you will be the advisor that's working with them.
Or don't, and just keep working with baby boomers that are retiring. There's tens of thousands of baby boomers retiring every day, I believe. So just keep working with them if that's what you want to do. Don't tell me you can't work with younger clients. Tell me you don't want to. Okay, so I know we derailed a little bit. So you moved from John Hancock to Signator, which was sort of this intercompany move, and then you mentioned being on the buy side of a broker dealer. So did Signator buy a broker dealer, or did it buy itself?
No, so at that point, we decided that from a growth perspective, we needed to acquire and add additional advisors, and so the decision was made to purchase the Transamerica independent broker dealer, referred to as Transamerica Financial Advisors. And what that ended up being is an acquisition where we did an asset purchase on about 700 advisors and their clients and from Transamerica. And we moved those advisors and clients from Transamerica's broker dealer into Signator Investors.
Okay. How did that go? I mean, what is life like for an advisor or a rep at a broker dealer being sold? Because I know, plenty of our listeners are going through or will go through one if they're at a broker dealer, because ultimately there are so many mergers.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the structure of the purchase, right? And whether it's done as an asset purchase or a purchase of the entity as well. In this case, it was done as an asset purchase because the entity that the Transamerica broker-dealer was remaining in place.
Okay.
And I would say that this transition was very difficult for the advisors that had to go through that move. And the reason for that is while there wasn't, the accounts were able to move negative consent for the most part. However, they still needed to transition from one entity to another. And the compensation needed to transition from one entity to another and the processes that were in place at the old broker dealer are not the same processes and paperwork that are in place at the new broker dealer. And so while some of those types of accounts transition relatively smoothly, there's other types of accounts that don't. And when you start looking at, there's a lot of different, whether it's a brokerage account on a clearing platform, a directly held mutual fund, or directly held annuity or insurance policy, or a managed account, right? There's a lot of different variables that go into that. And we were probably dealing with account transfer issues and compensation issues for up to, 6 to 9 months after the completion of the purchase.
So did some of the advisors, did they use that as an opportunity to go launch their own firm and sort of break away or to evaluate other alternatives, or was it sort of locked in just the way that structure was?
No, I'll be completely transparent. We were transparent with advisors in that, look, this was their opportunity to evaluate other options. The advantage of going through a transition when there is a purchase in place is the accounts will move negative consent. So you don't have to go out to your clients and get them to sign new paperwork. If the advisor wanted to go to a different firm, they would have to go out and get each of their clients to sign individual transfer paperwork to move. And so that is really the big difference between going through a transition with the company that's buying you versus going somewhere else. It's the having to get positive client consent on paperwork or the accounts moving negative consent.
And depending on the relationship, if you've got a great ongoing actual relationship with your clients, that may not seem like a big deal. If it's really transactional and you've got products you sold 15 years ago and you're still getting trails, maybe not the easiest thing. Okay, so that was the buy side and then the sell side. So you were a part of the leadership team that actually sold Signator then to Royal Alliance, which is part of the Advisor Group, which is a behemoth of a broker dealer. So I don't know if, I guess Advisor Group itself is a broker dealer that owns 5 broker dealers and they're buying them up. So they're massive.
Yeah. So they have Advisor Group has a number of different business models in broker dealers that are part of Advisor Group. And Royal Alliance is a similar business model that we were running at Signator. And what that means is they're running what we would call an OSJ model, where the supervisory and compliance responsibilities are at the local firm. And that is the same model that we were running at Signator. And that's why that it made sense when ultimately Advisor Group decided to buy Signator to merge Signator directly into Royal Alliance, because it was the same business model.
Similar business model. So you obviously had the opportunity to stay with Signator, now Royal Alliance. What caused you moved here from now in Bozeman, Montana, from Boston, Massachusetts? I mean, pretty much the same town.
Yep. It wasn't location that made me move at all.
So what ultimately made you decide that this is a pretty big pivot from director of recruiting of Signator to director of advisor success at XY?
Yeah. So the same conversation we just had about advisors being able to evaluate and decide what is the right place for them in their business. This sale provided me the opportunity to really take a look at, the industry and where the industry is going and what organization I wanted to be a part of. And really what I was looking at is, from a 3 to 5 years down the road, where is the industry going? What's the growth potential in these different types of channels, in the fee-only space versus the broker-dealer space? And, going back to something that I said, in the beginning as we were talking, I look at, the ability to be able to recruit and bring new talent into an organization. If people are joining, right, it's and you're growing organically, those are the type of organizations that you want to be a part of. And ultimately, as I looked at, where the industry was going, I think that it's transitioned, it's been transitioning to the fee space, and it's just going to continue to do that. And have the opportunity to join a group like XYPN and essentially set the foundation and be a launching pad for fee-only advisors as they continue to grow their businesses. That opportunity doesn't present itself very often. And I think that we have a very unique opportunity here at XYPN to really create a business model and define a career path for people to not only join and launch a firm, but ultimately to build and grow that firm. And, to be successful, to ultimately get through their first year, get through their second year. If we can create an XYPN process and a model for them to do that and ultimately build these sustainable fee-based financial planning firms, we're really in a unique spot to be able to set the foundation for them and, provide that process, because I don't think it exists today.
It really doesn't. I mean, it probably does at the mega firm level that, with the firms that the dynasties of the world are serving that have billions in assets. But yeah, for the new firm owner or the younger firm owner that's trying to get started, and really helping them lay that foundation for success, because the decisions that you make in your first year in business do matter. What you set your fees at in year one. Yes, you can always raise them, but it's really nice when they're high enough coming out of the gate that you can, get to profitability a little faster. So how do you define advisor success and what the mission is of the advisor success department?
So very simply, the mission of the advisor success department is to help advisors be better financial planners and ultimately run better businesses. And so there are those two components. But, the way and kind of broadly how I define advisor success is, are we providing the advisors the right resources that they need where their business is at to help them be successful? And so what I mean by that is we need to provide resources for advisors to help them before they're even launched, right? What are the things I need to do to prep to get launched to start my firm? From there, what are the things that I need to be doing in the first 12 months as I get my first client, get my first 5 clients, get my first 10 clients? What are the compliance considerations? What are the things I need to be doing from a books perspective? What are the KPIs I should be tracking? All these different things about running a business and getting clients, right, in that first 12 months. After that, we also need to be providing resources. We've got a lot of firms that are at that 12-month period now, have a good foundation and are ready to grow, right? What are the different things that we can provide? What are the marketing sales, business coaching resources that we can provide to those advisors to help them grow, get to a capacity level in their business where, their time is completely packed with client meetings and they've reached capacity where they're at. And then the final stage of that is, once you get to capacity, what's next? Do you want to continue growing? Do you want to hire another advisor into your practice? Or are you happy running, being the lead planner of your firm, and you want to enhance your client experience, maybe enhance your quality of life a little bit more. And so providing resources to help the business owner part, once they've reached that point, where do they want to grow? Do they want to scale up and continue to grow, or are they happy with the way their business is running today?
Yeah, I love that framework. We've been talking a lot about, what do you want to be when you grow up as a business owner? And that's why we're going to be hosting XYPN Pause, which is our first ever business strategy summit here in Bozeman in May for 30 of our members. And it really is about stop, take a second, take a step out of the business. It's the whole cliche of work on the business, not in the business, but it really is around this, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you define sort of these three areas we've been talking a lot about internally, which is, we have some advisors that want to grow a really big company, right? They want billions under management, thousands of clients, and, 100 advisors. Fantastic. They're really looking to scale. We have the other side, what we have called lifestyle practice. And we have started splitting this group. And I hate the term lifestyle. We haven't come up with a better term yet. It is someone who's looking to build a business in sort of a different way. And I'll say that's more founder centric than an enterprise is. Really you're building an enterprise company to be company centric. And we've sort of started splitting this into do you want to be solo? And I'll say your primary job is financial planner, where all you do is financial planning because it's just you. You have your 75 to 100 clients and that's your day, and you build your life around that. You can go this enterprise scaled where you are business owner. You don't really do any financial planning because once you have a few advisors on the books, you're no longer be doing planning. There's also sort of this middle ground of advisors that want to grow some. They want to have 3 to 5 advisors, 10 advisors, maybe 20, but they don't want to be huge. And they almost want to be this part business owner, part financial planner, which we don't talk a lot about that group, but I suspect maybe 2 or 3% of our members want to be the scaled. The other 97% are probably split pretty evenly between those two groups.
Yeah. And I think that as we look at those 3 groups, but specifically those 2 groups, what they're going to be looking for to resources to be able to run a business are going to be different. And, that's the unique thing, the unique position that we're in, is to be able to provide resources to each of those segments of advisors and firms. And, you brought up the XYPN Pause meeting that we're having here. And really the unique part of that meeting is, you can go to any number of different financial conferences and learn, financial planning techniques and things like this. What really makes this meeting unique is it is all about business strategy and where do I want my business to go? And, so many times advisors don't take the time to step back and look at their business and think about running it as a business. They're so caught up in, providing the financial planning to their clients and making sure that they're helping their clients in providing the best service possible to their clients, which is fantastic. But, often that comes and they don't take the time to step back and look at their own business and plan out where their business is going. And so that's what we really want to provide here, is that opportunity for a business owner to take that step back, evaluate their current business strategy, help them put together a strategy for the next 3 to 5 years, and then also help them implement that strategy down the road.
And it's really run your business as a business. And it's really easy when it's just you to sort of run your business like your own personal piggy bank that, whatever money the business makes, you get to go spend and not reinvest in the business or build the infrastructure. But even if you're going to stay solo, but especially if you're ever going to hire anybody, it is really important to have that foundation of running the business as a business. But to your point, be sure you know what you're building. And we've said on this podcast dozens of times, but if you are not focused on building the right business, you may build a business that you hate. And it is really a fine line between building a business that you love and building a business that you hate. And the business that you hate does not support your lifestyles or your goal or your ability to live your great life. and, at this stage in your life. And quite honestly, what you build maybe when you have young kids and versus the business that you decide to build after they're in college, maybe very different businesses, and that's okay. But being really focused on that. And that's something that is unique in our business because there's not very many industries that you can come in and be like, okay, this is how much money I want to make. This is how many hours I want to work. Go. And is it that easy? No, but you can actually build a business like that. There aren't a ton of businesses out there, I think, that really provide you the ability to build, a business where you're working 20 hours a week and making good money, or building this mid-sized business, or building an enterprise and really letting you pick and choose your path.
And so by you saying that, right, that there aren't a lot of businesses like this. And you forgot to also mention that you get to help people, achieve their most important.
Yeah, it's actually a helping dreams, profession.
Right. So for all those reasons, why aren't more people coming in and, coming into this industry and starting that? Right. And that's really the question that I always struggled with throughout my career, right? This is a great profession. We're doing great things, and the advisors are doing great things for their clients. So why aren't more people rushing to join this career and this career path? And so that's ultimately one of the things, that I think we can change, right? And we can do that by, talking more about the profession and what it truly is, about advice and planning, and having a career path for people, so we can actually show them how to start and how to build that business.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough that, the perception of financial planning is so negative. I serve on a CFP board, workforce development committee, and the statistics just show people think we're all con artists. Essentially, we're the least trusted profession. The only organization or group that is less trusted than us is Congress. So go us. And we earned that reputation across the industry for bad behavior, and that we tolerated it. But ultimately, even when we do get people in, and not to pick on MassMutual, because ultimately any company that my parents know the name of has this churn and burn mentality. And that is that, all of these companies are bringing in 20 people and churning out 17 of them. And we lose them because we don't have the opportunity to show them hey, that was one side of the world. And the 3 to 5 of you that were successful, fantastic, go do your thing. But for the other 15 to 17 of you, here's another way and another path, and maybe something closer to what you thought financial planning was going to be. And it's been tough because all of our firms are so small, really across the fiduciary fee only side of our industry, that we can't hire enough people, that we're not out there hiring, thousands of people at a time like a Northwestern Mutual. I wish we were. And one day we will get there. There's some firms that Creative Planning and Mariner and, United Capital, all these, these folks are trying to build those regional firms that hopefully provides that career path. So, if those three combined are hiring 5,000 advisors a year because they're just growing like crazy, that's actually good, I think, for us, even from a business perspective, but it's certainly good for the profession that we'll be able to show more people what real financial planning is.
Yeah. And I think that, as the profession evolves, right, and it will continue to evolve, and, starting with education requirements, right, and starting with, one of the, I love the fact that, all these schools now are, offering financial planning as a graduate or undergraduate degree. And people are learning, in college now what it means to be a financial planner, and the type of advice and the type of things that financial planning and financial planners do with their clients.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who got a couple of degrees in financial planning, I almost couldn't graduate from the University of Georgia because I had not taken a class that exempted me from the state constitutional education requirement. So only certain classes at UGA exempted you from it. I did not take one of those correct classes. So I had to take a test on the Georgia state constitution. I had to know how many Supreme Court justices there were, the branches of government in Georgia, all of these things about Georgia government. And I did not have to take a financial literacy class. So it was just a great example of why am I doing this? What does this matter? Yet we're not teaching basic budgeting skills. And what's the difference between a debit card and a credit card? I bet 80% of college students have no idea. But there's a Visa logo on my debit card. What does that mean? And there's so much opportunity.
Yeah. And I think that as we define those education requirements, that will help define the career path of how to get into the business and then how to progress in the business. And as we do that, if you have a more defined career path for someone and you can show what the next steps are, you're going to attract a higher quality person, right? If you can show what the compensation expectations are, right? It's not just a commission based, you basically earn what you sell business. If there is a compensation structure, there is a career path, you can then start to attract a higher level and really kind of attract, we're going to attract more of the people that we want into this profession.
Totally agree. Well, we have quickly come up on our 1 hour time mark. You have spent your career in a couple different corners of the market, of our marketplace, because you've been on the insurance agency side. You've seen the broker dealer world. You're now on the fee only side, working directly with RIAs. Thinking back over your career and through the lens of our listeners that are maybe thinking about starting their own firm or just in that, initial part of getting launched. If there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, one thing that you've learned that you wish you had known before, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
When I look at, back on my career, there's a lot of really great things that I was able to experience and see. But essentially, I think the one piece of advice that I would give, whether it's a planner or whether it's, someone in an operational role in a firm or, someone to start their firm is really, when opportunities are presented to you, say yes. Right. And take advantage of that opportunity. A lot of times people will overanalyze a situation, right? And say, I don't have the time to take this on, or it's not really in my expertise, right? But I'm a big believer that, if an opportunity is presented to you, say yes, take it on and throw yourself 100% into it, right? And if you do that, things may not work out exactly the way you think they're going to when you say yes to that opportunity, but it's going to ultimately provide you new opportunities that never would have presented themselves to you.
Absolutely love it. Well, Malcolm, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your career path and what you're working on in the advisor success department. I am so excited to see more tools and resources and trainings that are going to be developed over the next really 12 to 24 months for the advisors in there. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Alan. Really happy to be here and excited to be part of XYPN and part of the future of financial advice here.
XYPN radio listeners, you're invited to attend the event of the year, and even better, you're invited to get your pass at the best possible price. The can't-miss annual XYPN Live Conference returns to St. Louis in September 2019 with valuable content for new firm launchers and established firm owners alike. Take a couple of days to work on your business instead of in your business, and connect with like-minded financial advisors leading the real financial planning movement. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/XYPN Live Radio to get a deal on your pass through the end of the month. But hurry, the price goes up at the first of the year. Visit xyplanningnetwork.com/XYPN Live Radio to grab your pass today. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.